Jake Cooper found himself on one of those peculiar summer nights when the breeze carries with it a hushed promise of adventure. His old farmhouse, passed down through 3 generations, stood at the edge of Tall Pine Road, with a modest plot of land out back. By the standards of the broader countryside, Jake's garden was small. Yet, to him, it felt like a vast kingdom, tended lovingly with care, the rows of ripening vegetables bearing the fruits of his patient labor. On that evening, beneath the shimmer of a half-hearted moon, he would discover something, or rather someone, that would change his life forever. He was closing up the tool shed when he noticed a faint rustling among his tomato plants. At first, he assumed it was merely an animal, a raccoon, perhaps, or a stray cat lured by the scent of overripe produce. But then he saw a figure, distinctly human in outline, yet oddly elongated. In a flash of curiosity and protectiveness, he grabbed his rake, inching toward the silhouette. The security light glowed above the back door, casting its milky beam across the garden. There, amid the leaves and vines, stood a tall woman, her skin a subtle shade of violet that shimmered whenever the moon's glow found her. Jake's heart pounded. In his 37 years, he had never seen anyone like her. She was easily 2 heads taller than he, and her violet skin glistened as if woven from stardust. She clutched 3 of his tomatoes in her slender fingers, holding them in a gesture of reverence, as though they were treasures beyond measure. Her dark, luminous eyes found Jake's. She seemed ready to flee, but a sound from the sky, like a distant mechanical hum, made her pause. "Don't be afraid," Jake said quietly, although his own nerves were rattling. He held out his hands, palms open to show he meant no harm. "I just want to know who you are, what you're doing here." She took a careful step back, her gaze flickering from Jake to the sky. Then, in a voice like a gentle chord, she replied, "I do not wish to bring harm, or to be discovered. These plants they called to me." For a moment, Jake thought she was talking nonsense, but her sincerity was unmistakable. Then, as if on cue, a cold silver glint slashed across the clouds above. A drone, sleek, humming, menacing, descended into view. Its searchlight swept over the orchard beyond the garden, narrowing its beam in a methodical sweep. The woman's posture shifted from hesitant curiosity to pure panic. Her brilliant eyes pleaded with Jake. "Help me," she whispered. "I am being hunted." Jake glanced toward the menacing drone. He had heard about these sorts of corporate trackers. Rumor had it they belonged to powerful, private organizations with enough technology to run covert operations. The question was, what were they doing here, in his corner of the rural countryside? Before Jake could rationalize the consequences, he motioned for the woman to follow him. She darted behind him, pressing close to the broad back of his flannel shirt. Carefully, he led her around the back of the house, silently unlocked the door, and ushered her inside. The drone's spotlight grazed the garden just as Jake flicked off the outdoor lamp and closed the door with barely a click. Inside, in the dim glow of the kitchen's single overhead bulb, Jake found himself face to face with this violet-skinned stranger. Her features seemed more human now that he saw them up close, though her tall frame and shimmering complexion spoke of otherworldly origins. She stood there, clutching the tomatoes against her chest, as though they provided some measure of comfort. They stared at one another in silence for a few moments, the hush punctuated only by the hum of the refrigerator. Then she spoke, voice trembling with relief. "Thank you for helping me." Jake exhaled, setting aside his rake. "I'm Jake Cooper. And you?" "My name is Alara," she said, each syllable tender, carefully formed. She took a shaky breath. "I'm sorry for taking your tomatoes. I've been away from my designated place, on the run. I was hungry, and their energy beckoned to me." Jake could not quite comprehend what she meant by energy. Still, he nodded, inviting her to sit at the wooden table in the center of his modest kitchen. He fetched a glass of water and offered her a seat, trying to reconcile everything in his mind. Alara took the water gratefully, sipping it slowly, her expression revealing overwhelming weariness. He studied her. The shape of her face was reminiscent of a human's, except for a faintly glowing mark along her temples. She wore a simple outfit that looked neither fully terrestrial nor entirely alien, some form of silken fabric that subtly changed color in the shifting light. Finally, Jake mustered the courage to ask, "Alara, where are you from?" Her eyes darted to the window, as though expecting the drone to reappear at any moment. I'm not from Earth, she admitted softly. I was created by a powerful corporation on a planet far from here. They designed me for diplomacy, to traverse different worlds and negotiate on behalf of their interests. But I discovered the truth of their cruelty. They manipulate entire civilizations, forging alliances that serve only their twisted ambitions. I refused to comply, so I fled. Jake felt the hair on his arms stand on end. He had heard conspiracy theories about interstellar corporations that meddled in clandestine deals, but he had never imagined he would be faced with the flesh and blood evidence of such an operation in his own kitchen. So, you're saying they're hunting you because you won't do their bidding anymore? Yes, she said, staring into the water glass. I am a diplomat by design, but I was also engineered to carry certain empathic abilities. They rely on me to sway negotiations. I refuse to stand by while entire species were exploited. Now, I'm nothing more than a fugitive to them, and they will stop at nothing to reclaim their property. Jake could hardly believe what he was hearing. This was beyond anything he had encountered in his humble life. A life typically marked by the routine of sunrise to sunset, of garden chores and upkeep of the old farmhouse. Yet, despite the shock, he felt an undeniable stir of compassion. Listen, he began quietly. I'm no stranger to trouble, but this is next level. Still, you're safe here for the moment. If that drone's around, it'll be searching the property. We need to figure out what to do next. Alara's expression softened with gratitude. She bit her lower lip, as though searching for how best to convey her thanks. I did not mean to burden you, Jake Cooper. Let me at least, in some small way, help you with the garden. My talents allow me to commune with living things, plants especially. Your tomatoes, they spoke to me in a sense, and they provided me the nourishment I needed. Jake nodded, though his mind churned with questions. We'll talk about that later, all right? For now, you can stay in the spare room upstairs. I'll keep watch, and when morning comes, we'll figure out a plan. She agreed with a grateful tilt of her head. As Alara followed him through the creaking corridors of the old house, Jake caught a faint, pleasant scent, like jasmine and pine needles, emanating from her presence. He realized, with a pang of both worry and excitement, that nothing would ever be the same after this night. When morning light sliced through the tattered curtains of his bedroom, Jake awoke to the hum of possibility. Memories of the previous night rushed back to him. For a moment, he wondered if it had been a dream. Yet, upon stepping into the hallway, he could hear the faint shuffle of movement from the guest room. Alara was indeed still there. He brewed fresh coffee in a pot older than he cared to admit. A swirl of steam rose into the morning air as he poured 2 cups. He brought them to the small table by the window in the living room, close to a patch of golden sunlight. Presently, Alara emerged, looking somewhat more rested, yet still worn from her ordeal. She accepted the coffee with a courteous nod, sniffed at the unfamiliar aroma, and took a tentative sip. I hope it's not too strong, Jake said with a dry chuckle. I don't exactly know the coffee preferences of visitors from other worlds. Alara shook her head, a slight smile playing on her lips. It is robust, but pleasant. She sipped again, letting the warmth seep into her. Jake settled into a chair across from her. So, about that drone, he said, beginning the conversation he had rehearsed in his mind throughout the restless night. They're tracking you. Do you have any plan to stay hidden? Or do you think you might find safe passage off Earth? Alara pursed her lips, folding her long, slender hands in her lap. She took a moment to collect her thoughts. I had a small vessel, hidden in a remote area, but they destroyed it. Even if I had managed to keep it intact, the corporation has ways of detecting my biosignature wherever I attempt to land or depart. I had hoped to simply disappear somewhere quiet, where they would not think to look. But I fear I underestimated the reach of their technology. Jake frowned. This is bigger than I expected. I wonder if the local authorities can be of any help. Alara's reaction to the suggestion was immediate. She tensed, eyes full of alarm. No, the corporation's influence spreads wide. They often masquerade as philanthropic groups, forging alliances with local governments. I do not think your authorities would protect me. They might even hand me over in exchange for resources or technology. Jake felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He was a simple man. He knew about the manipulative potential of those wielding wealth and influence, but never had he dreamed the problem might span worlds. "So it's just us, then," he said, setting his coffee mug down with a resolute clink. "All right. Well, I can't just throw you out to fend for yourself. Let me think." He rose and began pacing, half-finished coffee forgotten. The morning sun shone through the window, illuminating a swirl of dust motes floating gently in the air. Outside, the sound of birds greeted the new day, oblivious to the cosmic drama unfolding inside Jake's home. "What about forging a new identity for you?" he asked after a moment. "I have an old friend in town who's good with computers. We could get you some form of ID, maybe buy you some time." Alara watched him with interest, though she seemed uncertain. "That may help, at least until the corporation sends more advanced trackers. The drones you saw are merely the first wave. They are scouting devices, but soon they will deploy their specialized agents." Jake frowned. "Agents?" "Yes," Alara replied with a tired sigh. "Individuals bred, or enhanced, to capture or eliminate those who defy the corporation. They are relentless. If I cannot find a way to mask my biosignature, eventually they will find me, and you as well." Jake paused, glancing through the window at his peaceful yard. The thought of turning Alara in, saving himself by removing her from his life, briefly crossed his mind. The safe and uneventful existence he had cherished could remain intact if he washed his hands of this. Yet the notion filled him with shame. He couldn't bring himself to do it. With a determined nod, he said, "All right. We'll try to hide you. Maybe I can speak to my friend, see what he can do. In the meantime, you said something about your ability to commune with plants." A faint glimmer crossed Alara's features. "I can nurture them, or guide them in their growth. If I concentrate, I can sense the flow of life, the subtle rhythms of growth. I imagine it might be very helpful in your garden, if that is a fair exchange for taking me in." Jake let out a soft laugh. "Fair exchange? That's more than fair. It might be the highlight of my tomato-growing career." He gave her a kind smile. "Let's just take this one step at a time." And so began an unlikely alliance. The ordinary man from rural Earth and the violet-skinned refugee from a distant star. Over the following days, Alara settled into an unassuming routine in the old farmhouse. She helped Jake with chores, discreetly using her empathic gifts to strengthen the garden's yield. Tomato plants grew hardier, their vines vibrant, producing fruit that seemed plumper and more flavorful with each passing sunrise. Even the flowers around the porch, which Jake's late grandmother had once adored, took on new life. Their petals spread wide in glorious, variegated blooms, as if thanking Alara for her tender care. Yet a constant shadow of danger loomed. At night, they kept the lights off, worried that a stray luminescence might draw the attention of those mechanical scouts in the sky. Jake tinkered with the security system, repositioning cameras and sensors, though he suspected any advanced drone would circumvent these rudimentary defenses in a heartbeat. Still, he found some comfort in trying. Every morning, Jake and Alara would share coffee or tea, discussing potential ways to hide her. Jake's friend, Hank Dawson, became an unexpected ally. Hank was an eccentric programmer who had once worked for a government contractor before retreating to the outskirts of town, harboring a healthy distrust of large institutions. If anyone could fabricate an untraceable identity, Jake reasoned, it would be Hank. It took some coaxing, but one evening Jake drove out to Hank's place, leaving Alara hidden in the basement in case the drone surveillance spotted her. He told Hank of a hypothetical friend from abroad who needed a fresh start, a friend who had powerful enemies and required a brand-new digital footprint. Hank squinted suspiciously, arms crossed over his scrawny frame. "Jake, you realize forging identities is serious business," he said. "Why do I get the feeling this is bigger than you're letting on?" Jake did his best to remain vague. "Let's just say, it's life and death for my friend. I wouldn't ask if I weren't desperate." After a moment's hesitation, Hank relented. "I can put together some documents. Won't stand up to deep scrutiny, but it might help them move around without attracting attention." Jake shook the man's hand, heart pounding with relief. "That's all I ask, Hank. Thank you." Over the following week, as Hank worked behind the scenes, Alara and Jake kept an ever-vigilant eye on the sky. On the fourth night, they heard a low whir in the distance. Within moments, a bluish searchlight sliced the darkness. One of the corporation's drones was back. Jake killed the lights, and together, He and Alara flattened themselves against the living room wall, breath held. Outside, a mechanical hum swept overhead, flickering across the yard. For a tense minute, the scanning beam probed the perimeter of the farmhouse, shining on the porch, the windows, the orchard. Then, with a shrill, insect-like buzz, the machine rose higher, drifting on to continue its search elsewhere. In the ensuing silence, Jake's heart hammered. He glanced at Alara, who had closed her eyes. He placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. She turned to him with a look that mingled gratitude and fear. "It won't stop," she whispered. "They know I'm near." Jake exhaled slowly. "If that's just a scouting drone, I can only imagine what the next steps might be. We need to hurry. The documents from Hank should be ready soon. Then we figure out how to get you out of here, maybe to some bigger city where you can blend in." A flicker of sadness passed through Alara's gaze as she looked around the cozy living room. "I've come to value this little patch of peace more than you know," she admitted. I regret dragging you into my conflict." Jake managed a small smile. "No regrets. I'm in this with you." The days that followed were a delicate dance of secrecy and planning. Alara, ever cautious, spent most of her time indoors, venturing outside only at dawn or dusk to tend the garden. Jake would sometimes watch her from a distance, marveling at how she would rest her palms lightly on the soil, as if greeting each plant in turn. It wasn't just that they thrived under her care. The entire landscape seemed to vibrate with renewed life. Bees hummed more happily among the blooms. Morning dew shimmered with a heightened glow. It was as though Alara's very presence breathed an otherworldly infusion into the land. Finally, Hank called, telling Jake he had something ready. The ID, a social security number, a couple of reference documents. It was as legitimate a paper trail as one could hope for on short notice, though Hank warned there were no guarantees if higher authorities got involved. Jake and Alara spread the documents on the table in the dusky light of a single lamp. A new name, a fictitious birthplace, some carefully crafted background details. Alara's expression was hard to read. "Your friend must be quite skilled," she observed quietly. Jake nodded. "He's a genius with computers. Just doesn't trust big institutions, so he's willing to help. I figure we can get you to Atlanta. Large city, plenty of places to lose yourself. Then maybe you can catch a bus or find someone to take you further. Eventually, you might reach some port or a place where you can hide long-term." She heard the unspoken sadness in his tone. "And what about you?" she asked gently, turning to meet his eyes. Jake looked away, clearing his throat. "I'll stay here. I have the farm. My family's home. But maybe if you're safe, we'll figure out a way to keep in touch." He swallowed a knot of conflicting emotions. Alara placed her slender hand on his. "You have been kinder to me than I could ever have hoped for. I only wish I did not have to vanish so swiftly." Jake shook his head. "Your safety is all that matters. We'll leave tomorrow, before dawn, drive until we reach the city. You can use the ID to find lodging under your new name. Then, after a few days, hopefully, the trail goes cold. The drones will keep circling, but maybe they won't find you." The plan, while straightforward, wasn't guaranteed. They both knew the corporation might be a step ahead. Nonetheless, as the midnight hours pressed on, they prepared. Alara packed a small bag, not that she had many belongings, while Jake readied his old pickup truck. He placed the forged documents in the glove compartment, tested the engine, and stared at the starlit sky, wondering if it was the last time he would share his quiet home with Alara's ethereal presence. They departed the next morning in the dark stillness before dawn, the truck's engine purring softly as they rattled down the narrow driveway. Alara gazed out at the fields, the orchard, and the old barn, her expression tinged with melancholy. Jake glanced in the rearview mirror, silently hoping they wouldn't see the ominous shape of a drone tailing them. The roads leading out of town were blessedly empty at that hour, save for the occasional headlights of a passing truck. Jake navigated along winding routes, choosing back roads over the main highway, hoping to evade any sophisticated scanning devices. The horizon began to brighten with the faintest tinge of pink as they pressed onward. Before long, they approached a bridge spanning the wide, slow-moving river that cut through the region. A few scattered lights flickered on either side of the water, signifying some early risers. Jake's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Alara glanced over at him. She opened her mouth as if to speak, only to freeze. Her eyes widened. A solitary drone emerged from behind a tall stand of cypress trees, its metallic shell glinting in the early morning light. It hovered momentarily, then swooped toward them with a predatory grace. Jake cursed under his breath, pressing the gas pedal instinctively. The drone's hum intensified, its searchlights snapping on. Jake flicked off his headlights, hoping to reduce their visibility, but it was too late. A beam pinned the truck in the early dawn gloom. Then, with a whoosh, the drone unleashed a projectile that embedded in the asphalt just ahead, a small, glowing device that pulsed ominously. Jake veered to avoid it, nearly skidding off the road. "They found us," he shouted, adrenaline surging. Alara's features hardened. "Stop the truck." Jake balked. "What? We can't just—" "Stop," she repeated firmly. He slammed the brakes. The truck screeched to a halt. The drone pivoted, its scanning beams dissecting every angle of the truck. Jake looked at her, perplexed. "Alara, we have to run. If you get out, they'll—" But Alara was already climbing out of the cab, her long legs unfolding onto the road. Her violet skin glistened as she walked calmly into the drone's spotlight. For a moment, Jake feared this was surrender, that she was giving herself up to spare him. Yet he could not abandon her. He fumbled with the door, stumbling out to follow her. To his shock, Alara raised her arms, palms facing the mechanical menace. A faint glow suffused her body, radiating from the symbol near her temples. The drone emitted a burst of static, its searchlight flickering in confusion. Then Jake noticed the surrounding plant life. The tall grasses along the roadside, the moss clinging to the cypress trunks, seemed to stir. He swore he heard a subtle groan of wood, a creak of fiber. Twisting vines and branches, awakened by Alara's empathic abilities, began to move. Slowly, they coiled upward around the drone's body, tangling in its rotors, jamming its mechanical joints. The machine sputtered, flashing red lights in distress, while the vegetation tightened its grip. A shower of sparks erupted from the drone's undercarriage, followed by an ear-splitting shriek as motors shorted out. Jake shielded his eyes, half in disbelief at the spectacle. Alara's face was locked in an expression of fierce concentration. With a final wrenching groan, the drone crashed to the ground, entombed by writhing vines. The engine's dying hum faded into silence. For a moment, all was still. Then Alara wavered, as though the monumental effort had drained her. Jake rushed forward, catching her before she collapsed. She rested against his shoulder, breath quick and shallow. "Are you all right?" he asked, voice trembling with concern. She nodded weakly. "Yes, I just used a great deal of energy." Jake cast a quick glance at the wreckage of the drone. It lay partially hidden under the vines, but he could see blinking lights on its panel, as if it were transmitting some final signal. "We have to keep moving. Whatever that thing sent out, it might alert the next wave." Alara, regaining composure, stood upright. "You're right." They hurried back into the truck. Jake started the engine, heart pounding, and stomped on the gas. The tires spun briefly before finding traction, and the truck sped off toward the distant city lights that peeked over the horizon. The rest of the drive was fraught with tension. Alara periodically glanced at the sky, while Jake white-knuckled the steering wheel, scanning the road for any sign of pursuit. At last, they entered the outskirts of Atlanta, merging into the early morning flow of commuter traffic. Neon signs and high-rise buildings replaced farmland and groves. Jake pulled into a dimly lit parking lot behind a generic motel. Shutting off the engine, he exhaled a ragged breath. They had made it, at least, for the moment. Alara looked at the shabby facade of the motel. "This is where we part ways?" she asked softly. Jake swallowed, feeling an emotional weight settle over him. "I guess so. You'll be safer blending into a crowd. Use the ID to check in under your new name. Just don't stay too long in one place." Alara turned to him, her eyes reflecting a whirlwind of sentiment. "You risked everything for me," she whispered. "I have no words to express my gratitude." Jake managed a faint smile, though sorrow tugged at him. "Promise me you'll stay safe. That's all I want." She leaned closer, pressing a tender kiss to his cheek, something so gentle and otherworldly that it left Jake both awed and heartbroken. "Your kindness will not be forgotten," she said. "Ever." With that, she grabbed her small bag and climbed out of the truck. Jake watched her walk toward the motel, the dull glow of a neon sign casting her figure in a shifting palette of colors. She glanced back once, then disappeared inside. Jake lingered there a moment, fighting the urge to leap out and follow her. But he knew this was how it had to be. Sighing, he pulled away, merging back onto the street. His only hope was that Alara's new identity would hold long enough for her to slip from the corporation's radar. The following days were a slow blur of half-hearted routine. Jake returned to the farmhouse, alone now. The garden, once tended by Alara's empathic hands, still seemed vibrant, though something intangible felt missing. His old life drifted back around him like a comfortable coat that no longer fit quite right. At night, he found himself glancing at the sky, wondering if a silent drone was circling overhead. He would picture Alara, somewhere in the bustle of the city or far beyond, forging a life in the shadows, always on the run. Weeks passed without incident. No more drones appeared above his fields. No agents came knocking at his door. Jake began to let down his guard, thinking perhaps Alara had eluded capture or found some safer place, possibly even off-world if she were lucky enough to secure passage. In a bittersweet way, life began to stabilize again. One evening, as the sun sank low over the orchard, painting the sky in rosy hues, Jake was outside, pruning the rose bushes that Alara had once revitalized. Their blossoms shone with an otherworldly luster, as if still carrying the echo of her gift. He paused, noticing a subtle rustling behind him. On instinct, he turned, heart pounding at the possibility of a drone or something worse. Instead, he saw a familiar silhouette, tall, elegant, her violet skin bathed in the soft radiance of twilight. Alara stood at the garden's edge, a small smile gracing her features. Jake let his pruning shears fall to the ground in astonishment. "Alara," he breathed. She nodded, stepping forward. "I had to see you, to tell you what happened." Emotions surged within him, part relief, part concern. "I thought you'd be gone for good. Are you safe? Should you be here?" She placed a reassuring hand on his forearm, and a warmth spread through him. "I managed to link up with some allies, others who have fled or resisted the corporation. They helped shield me from detection. We've been working on a plan, an underground network of sorts, to help more people and more beings escape." Jake listened, a growing sense of awe in his chest. "That's incredible." Alara's expression glowed with renewed purpose. "We believe we can expose the corporation's nefarious activities to certain galactic councils, groups that still uphold ethical standards, even across worlds. But it requires bravery, testimonies, evidence. I thought, perhaps you'd want to know I'm all right, and also, that I could use your help, if you were willing." Jake blinked. "My help? I don't know what I could possibly offer." "You know Earth," she explained. "You've also been in contact with me, witnessed firsthand the corporation's pursuit of a fugitive. If you can provide testimony, we might hold them accountable on this planet as well, expose their clandestine dealings. That's how they operate, you see, by staying hidden behind veils of secrecy." Jake's mind raced. This was more involvement than he had ever imagined. Yet, thinking back on the night he first found her clutching tomatoes in the garden, the terror in her eyes as the drone hovered above, he felt a resolute surge of determination. If it can make a difference, if it can stop them from hurting you, or anyone else, they can count me in. Alara's face brightened with gratitude, and at that moment, the hush of the garden enveloped them, as though bestowing its blessing. "Thank you, Jake Cooper," she said softly. They entered the farmhouse, stepping into the comforting familiarity of its worn floors and warm lamps. Jake brewed a pot of tea, marveling at how surreal it felt to have Alara sitting at his old wooden table once again. She explained, in detail, the network forming among those who had fled the corporation's grasp, a clandestine alliance of scientists, diplomats, and mercenaries from various planets. They planned to gather indisputable proof of the corporation's malicious activities, everything from unethical experiments to forced annexation of smaller worlds. Jake listened closely. "I had no idea there were so many people like you," he admitted, "all seeking freedom, seeking justice." She nodded, her gaze distant. "Our galaxy is vast, and greed does not confine itself to one world or one species. But neither does hope." They spent that evening drafting plans, exchanging every bit of information that might be used to discredit the corporation. Jake recounted every detail of the drone attack, from the moment it landed on the road to how it emitted that final pulse before Alara destroyed it with living vines. He furnished the fragments he had collected from the crash site, a few twisted pieces of alloy, some circuits, hoping they would serve as physical evidence of advanced technology operating illegally on Earth. Alara looked upon these items with grim satisfaction. "This could be the proof we need," she said. "If we can show that they're deploying these drones in violation of interplanetary treaties, the councils will have grounds to intervene." Yet a lingering question gnawed at Jake. "Are you sure we won't just paint a target on our backs by doing this?" Alara's jaw set in determination. "They've already targeted me, and they destroyed any chance I had of returning to a normal life. For me, this fight has become inevitable. But for you, I understand if you wish to remain uninvolved." Jake hesitated, recalling a time before all this when his life revolved around planting seeds and harvesting crops. But deep down, he knew that path no longer existed. He reached across the table, taking her hand in a gesture of solidarity. "I'm with you," he affirmed quietly. Alara smiled. A light kindled in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. They soon reached out to her new contacts off-world via an encrypted communicator that Alara carried, a small silver device shaped like a teardrop. She transmitted the data about the drone fragments, the coordinates, and her testimony. Jake composed a statement of his own, detailing how the drone threatened him and how he witnessed Alara's escape from these pursuers. They left out no detail that might bolster their cause. Days stretched into a week as they waited for a reply. Jake tended his fields, working side by side with Alara as she revived struggling plants and enriched the soil through her empathic gift. That time was unexpectedly peaceful, akin to a calm before an imminent storm. At night, they would gaze at the star-speckled sky, discussing the future. Alara confided stories of distant worlds, shimmering seas of crystal, and skies with twin suns. Jake spoke of his childhood on the farm, learning life's lessons with each changing season. Finally, a response arrived on the communicator. Alara's allies had succeeded in presenting the initial evidence to a galactic tribunal, which expressed serious concern. They requested that Alara, and any witnesses, be present for a more formal hearing. In short, they wanted her to travel off-world to testify, and they wanted Jake to come as well. The notion of leaving Earth rocked Jake to his core. He had never ventured beyond the solar system's boundaries. In fact, he had rarely left the state. The idea of crossing star lanes to stand before an interstellar assembly was, in no uncertain terms, terrifying. Yet, Alara's conviction was unwavering. If they succeeded, it would mean justice for countless worlds. Jake stood on the porch at sunset, looking out over the orchard. He could feel Alara's presence behind him before she spoke. "I know this is a lot to ask," she said softly. He turned, meeting her eyes in the fading light. "Everything that's happened since I found you in my garden has been unimaginable. But if this is our chance to stop them, to protect you and others like you, I'm willing to try." The decision was made. They would rendezvous with Alara's allies, who had secured a hidden transport that could evade the corporation's scanners. The flight off Earth would be the first step in a journey of unknown perils and unimaginable possibilities. Under the cloak of another moonless night, Jake and Alara slipped away from the farmhouse. Jake left a note for Hank, a short explanation of his sudden departure, expressing his deep gratitude for the man's help. He also left instructions for a neighbor to check on the property, to look after the orchard if he was gone for too long. It was bittersweet, but necessary. They drove westward, following a set of cryptic coordinates Alara's allies had provided. The location lay deep in the mountains, miles from any paved road. Eventually, they parked near an overgrown trail, continuing on foot beneath the canopy of towering pines. At last, they came upon a small clearing. A camouflaged craft, shaped like a sleek wedge, stood silent among the tall grass. As they approached, a door slid open with a whisper. 3 figures emerged, 2 humans wearing simple gray suits, and a third figure whose features were partially concealed by a cloak, but whose elongated limbs hinted at a non-human origin. Alara greeted them with relief, exchanging a few words in a lilting alien tongue that Jake could not quite follow. One of the humans, a sandy-haired woman, turned to Jake and extended a hand. "Mr. Cooper, thank you for coming. I'm Commander Lee of the Alliance." We're going to get you and Alara to safety, and then to testify before the tribunal." Jake shook her hand, feeling his pulse spike. I appreciate it. I'm still trying to wrap my head around all this." Commander Lee gave him a sympathetic smile. "We understand. We'll do our best to make the journey as smooth as possible. But we must hurry." Alara and Jake followed the trio into the craft. Inside, the space was Spartan but functional, with rows of seats and a small cockpit bristling with unfamiliar instruments. The cloaked figure secured the hatch, and Alara guided Jake to a seat by a narrow window. Through it, he caught a final glimpse of Earth's night sky. A pang of loss coursed through him. He was truly leaving his home, uncertain if he would ever return. The engines hummed to life, barely perceptible at first, then rising in pitch until the ship lifted off the ground with a gentle glide. Trees fell away beneath them, and soon the craft soared above the ridgeline, outpacing any prying eyes that might dwell below. Jake clenched his jaw, hands gripping the armrests. Alara placed a reassuring hand on his, calming his nerves. He inhaled deeply, fighting the surge of dizzy awe. Within minutes, they broke through cloud cover, ascending higher than Jake had ever gone, even on commercial flights. The horizon curved, the sky darkened, and a sea of stars embraced them. The planet's surface glimmered with scattered lights, each city and town seeming so tiny, so fragile. A swirl of emotions overwhelmed him: wonder, fear, exhilaration, and a poignant longing for the farm that grew tinier with each passing second. The next phase of the flight seemed to distort all sense of reality. An inky darkness spread across the windows, and swirling colors flickered in Jake's peripheral vision. He felt a heaviness, then a sudden weightlessness, as the craft made a jump through some advanced propulsion method beyond his understanding. Maybe a warp corridor or an interstellar gate. Alara squeezed his hand, and he felt grateful for her comforting presence. By the time the craft stabilized, the view outside revealed a field of stars infinitely more vibrant than anything visible from Earth's surface. He spotted a grand swirl of cosmic dust, luminous in shades of violet and blue. It reminded him of Alara's skin, that same faint, otherworldly shimmer. Commander Lee announced that they had cleared Earth's local region, set on course toward the designated meeting point with the Alliance's main vessel. Jake leaned back in his seat, letting the enormity of what he had undertaken sink in. Despite the fear, a spark of excitement kindled in him. This was, after all, a universe of infinite wonders, and he was seeing a fragment of it firsthand. Over the next few hours, or what Jake guessed were hours, as time felt strange out in the void, the small craft traversed silent gulfs of space. Alara explained that they would meet a larger vessel capable of traveling to the Council's gathering place. Jake nodded, though the logistics were beyond his comprehension. He found comfort in Alara's calm confidence and the presence of the Alliance members who had evidently orchestrated such escapes before. At last, they arrived at a mammoth spaceship, floating in the darkness like a gleaming fortress. Docking procedures commenced. The cloaked figure piloted them into a hangar bay, where uniformed personnel of various species waited. As the hatch opened, Jake stepped onto the deck, marveling at the scale of it all. Towering ceilings, corridors lit by softly glowing panels, the distant hum of advanced machinery. This was his new reality, at least for the moment. Commander Lee led them to a briefing room. A tall, lanky alien with a ridged forehead and skin tinged gold introduced himself as Commodore Herricks, the ranking officer of the vessel. He greeted Jake warmly. "We appreciate your courage," he said in a deep voice. Not many from Earth would choose to leave everything behind. Jake felt his cheeks flush. "I just did what I thought was right," he mumbled. Alara's eyes shone with gratitude as she introduced him to several others: ambassadors, refugees, and specialists who had been gathering evidence against the corporation for years. Their stories were harrowing. Entire cultures coerced into resource extraction deals, worlds pillaged for profit, entire populations displaced in the name of enterprise. Alara's role as a bioengineered diplomat made her an invaluable witness, someone who had been on the inside and could testify to the corporation's systematic manipulations. Jake found himself overwhelmed but determined. He had never given sworn testimony in a local court, let alone a cosmic tribunal that transcended star systems. Yet, As he listened to these stories, his resolve hardened. No one, human or otherwise, should be subjected to that kind of tyranny. Days passed aboard the Alliance vessel, during which Alara and Jake gave preliminary statements, underwent medical scans to verify their authenticity, and prepped for the formal hearing. Jake marveled at the technology around him. He found that the cafeteria served a bizarre array of dishes from multiple planets, including some that glowed faintly or changed texture as he ate them. Everyone aboard treated him with an odd mixture of respect and curiosity, for humans were not typically well known in the broader galactic community. Earth had not yet officially joined any interplanetary coalition. But the highlight of his day, unfailingly, was the time he spent walking with Alara through the vessel's hydroponic gardens, a tranquil space where plants from 100 worlds grew side by side. There, Alara would gently trace her fingertips along the leaves of exotic flora, communing with them as she had once done with his tomatoes. In those moments, Jake felt a profound sense of serenity. Here, in the vastness of space, far from his home, he found solace in her presence. News arrived that the tribunal would convene on a neutral station orbiting a gas giant several star systems away. The Alliance vessel made the journey without incident, though a vigilant watch was kept for any sign of the corporation's fleet. Tension ran high, for rumors circulated that the corporation's representatives might attempt to sabotage or disrupt the hearing. Despite the nerves, Alara and Jake pressed on, determined to see this through. When they finally arrived at the station, a colossal ring suspended near the swirling bands of a teal and gold gas giant. Jake's breath caught. He had never seen such an impressive construct. The ring, rotating gently to simulate gravity, spanned kilometers, studded with docking platforms, spires, and colossal windows revealing mesmerizing views of the planet below. Inside, the tribunal hall was a grand chamber lined with marble-like material, illuminated by tall panels that cast a soft, ambient glow. Delegates from an assortment of species filled rows of curved seating. High above, a domed ceiling displayed a holographic star map. The presiding council members, each representing various galactic coalitions, sat at a raised bench. Jake's heart pounded as he took a seat next to Alara, flanked by Alliance counselors who would present their case. The corporation's side was also present, men and women wearing crisp uniforms, their expressions guarded and severe. At the center of it all, an arbiter, an ancient being with translucent skin through which faint pulses of light could be seen, signaled the start of proceedings. One by one, witnesses were called. Some told tales of forced displacement or extortionate resource extraction that left entire ecosystems in ruins. Others recounted how the corporation leveraged advanced weaponry to pressure lesser-developed planets into compliance. Then came Alara's turn. She stood tall, her violet skin luminous in the tribunal's light, and described her creation as a diplomatic being engineered to sway negotiations. She recounted the day she discovered a hidden laboratory dedicated to genetic experimentation on captive species. Her voice trembled with emotion as she spoke of the moral revulsion she felt, how she chose to flee, and how she ended up on Earth, seeking refuge in a farmer's garden. Jake felt a surge of pride and protectiveness as he watched her, remembering the moment he first spotted her with those tomatoes under the pale glow of his security light. Finally, Jake was called. He stood before the council, pulse racing, and in a voice he tried to keep steady, he spoke of the night a drone nearly kidnapped Alara in his yard, the subsequent pursuit, the sabotage on the road, and the unwavering threat looming over them. His testimony was straightforward, unadorned by the complexities of interstellar politics, simply the truth of what he had seen and experienced. When he finished, the arbiter inclined its shimmering head, lights dancing beneath its skin, and thanked him for his statement. Jake's legs felt weak with relief as he returned to his seat. Alara gave him a gentle nod of gratitude. Next came the corporation's representatives. They spouted technicalities, calling Alara a rogue asset, implying her testimonies were orchestrated by unscrupulous rivals. They tried to undermine Jake's credibility, pointing out his lack of expertise in such matters. But the Alliance had anticipated these tactics. They presented the drone fragments Jake had retrieved, along with data logs Alara had smuggled out, evidence cross-verified by the Alliance's own experts. The corporation's arguments grew increasingly desperate. After nearly 3 days of intense deliberation, filled with depositions, cross-examinations, and presentations of evidence, the tribunal recessed to confer privately. A tense hush spread through the grand hall. Delegates mingled in small clusters, speculation thick in the air. Alara and Jake waited side by side, each silent, each praying for a favorable outcome. At last, the arbiter returned, accompanied by the council. A hush fell instantly, in a measured tone, its voice resonating in the chamber like ripples on a pond. The arbiter announced the verdict. The evidence clearly indicated violations of multiple interstellar regulations and treaties, from unethical experimentation to the unauthorized deployment of weaponized drones on non-aligned worlds. Sanctions would be placed on the corporation immediately. Its leaders would face further legal proceedings, with the possibility of more severe penalties. Meanwhile, Alara, recognized as a sentient being with intrinsic rights, was granted full protection under galactic law. Others in her situation were invited to come forward, to testify, and to receive safe haven. Applause, and in some corners, angry outcry, reverberated through the hall. Jake felt a wave of relief wash over him, so profound that it nearly brought tears to his eyes. Alara turned to him, a trembling smile of joy lighting up her face. Her hand found his, and the significance of that contact in that moment was overwhelming. A simple gesture that transcended countless star systems and all the adversity they had overcome. As the assembly broke up, Alara and Jake found themselves thronged by allies offering congratulations. Commander Lee clapped Jake on the shoulder, praising him for his bravery. Commodore Herrix, his golden skin glinting under the ambient light, stated that many more steps remained, but this was a monumental victory for the Alliance and for all who sought freedom from exploitation. Jake gazed at Alara through the commotion. She stood resplendent, her posture radiating a grace he had seen hinted at in his garden. Freed from the chains of her pursuers, she looked every bit the diplomat she was engineered to be, but now wielding her gifts for justice, not corporate greed. Later, they retreated to a quiet observation deck overlooking the gas giant. The swirling colors beyond the station's window provided a mesmerizing backdrop for their conversation. Jake leaned on the railing, feeling weightless, not from lack of gravity, but from the triumph coursing through him. "Did you ever imagine," Alara asked softly, "that you'd be standing on a station like this, looking out at a planet with turquoise storms?" Jake let out a breathy chuckle. "I never imagined finding an alien in my garden, either. Life's a funny thing." She slid closer, their shoulders nearly touching. "You've changed my world, Jake. When I first hid behind your tomato plants, I could never have dreamed I'd one day stand in front of a galactic council, testifying for the freedom of so many." Jake turned to her, the reflection of swirling clouds dancing in his eyes. "It was you who gave me the courage to act. Without you, I'd still be on Earth, oblivious to all of this." They lapsed into a comfortable silence, gazing at the cosmic vista. Jake wondered aloud about Earth's future in the galactic community. Would humankind eventually stand alongside these other civilizations, forging alliances based on shared ideals? Would Earth remain a quiet corner, blissfully ignorant of the drama unfolding in the stars? Alara nodded thoughtfully. "Much depends on the choices made by your leaders and by individuals like you. But if today has shown us anything, it's that even one voice, one act of compassion, can alter destiny." Jake felt a tightness in his chest, a rush of affection. He tentatively reached out, and she clasped his hand, weaving her fingers through his. The bond between them had been forged by extraordinary circumstances, yet it felt as natural as breathing. The next morning, free from fear and with the weight of the tribunal's verdict behind them, Alara and Jake stepped onto a transport that would take them back to the Alliance's main vessel. They departed the station, leaving behind the swirling gas giant, the luminous ring, and the echo of their victory. Ahead lay possibilities they had not fully mapped out. For Alara, the notion of returning to Earth was no longer tied to danger. For Jake, the horizon of his life had expanded beyond measure. Eventually, after many days of travel, they arrived in Earth's orbit, escorted by Alliance ships. The corporation's presence had been forcibly diminished. No more clandestine drones or lurking agents threatened them. Jake looked down at the familiar blue planet rotating in the darkness, a swirl of clouds and oceans. Alara turned to him in the spacecraft corridor. "Will you return to the farm?" she asked softly. Jake inhaled. "Yes," he said. "It's home. And it could be our home, if you want it to be. I know your life stretches across galaxies, but you're welcome to stay with me, even if just for a while." Her luminous eyes flickered with emotion, recalling the solace she found among his rows of tomatoes and wildflowers. "I'd like that," she whispered, "at least until the next call to duty comes. Because now that the corporation's threat has been diminished, there might be other causes out there, other injustices to stand against. It's who I am, Jake." He smiled, understanding and admiration flooding him. "I wouldn't expect anything else." And so they descended through Earth's atmosphere, the friction causing a brief streak of fire along the hull. The Alliance craft delivered them to a remote field, not far from Jake's farmhouse. Clouds parted, revealing the rustic landscape beneath. When they finally stepped onto the soft grass, Alara took a deep breath of Earth's air, a contented look gracing her features. Jake led her up the familiar dirt road. The orchard came into view, trees swaying gently in a breeze. The old farmhouse, chipped paint and all, stood steadfast, a reassuring constant amid the upheaval of interstellar exploits. It felt surreal, as though waking from a dream only to find that reality itself had shifted. In the days that followed, Alara helped Jake restore the garden. She infused new life into the soil, coaxing vibrant blooms from seeds that had lain dormant. Jake, for his part, resumed his daily routines, though now he did so with a broader perspective and a heart brimming with gratitude for the cosmic wonders he had witnessed. Sometimes, under the wide summer sky, he would recall the tense nights when they lived in fear of a hovering drone. He would remember the tribunal's majestic hall, the swirling gas giant, and the hush that fell when Alara testified. But now, that fear had receded, replaced by a soft sense of triumph. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the clouds in rose and lavender, Alara and Jake strolled together through the orchard. The air was sweet with the scent of ripe fruit. Fireflies began to glimmer in the gathering dusk. Jake reached for her hand. "I still can't believe how much has changed," he murmured, voice hushed by the depth of his awe. Alara turned to face him, her eyes reflecting the last rays of sunlight. "And yet, there's a comforting stillness here," she replied. "Amid the galaxies and the councils, the alliances and corporations, it's this little patch of Earth that feels most like home." Jake's throat tightened with a flood of emotion. "I'm glad you're here," he managed. She smiled, that subtle luminescence of her violet skin highlighted by the gentle twilight. The orchard's leaves rustled softly in the breeze, and in the distance, a whippoorwill called its evening tune. It was a moment of profound tranquility, a testament to the bond they had forged against all odds. Their story, of course, did not end there. Alara's calling would one day lead her to new horizons, to help others as she had helped the Alliance defeat the corporation's tyranny. Jake's life, too, would continue to evolve, shaped by the knowledge that he was part of a universe far grander than he had ever imagined. Yet on that night, together in the garden where their paths had first crossed, they shared in the peaceful hush of a world at rest. And so it was that Jake Cooper, an unassuming farmer from Tall Pine Road, and Alara, a fugitive alien once hunted by a powerful corporate machine, found a shared destiny beneath the stars. Their hearts, bound by courage and compassion, had illuminated a path from fear to freedom. In the gentle embrace of the orchard's twilight, they stood side by side, knowing that no matter where the galaxy's winds might carry them, they would forever carry the memory of how a single act of kindness could spark a beacon of hope that reached across the cosmos.